Well, good evening and welcome to Alive. I'm Patina and we are going to have an awesome show tonight. But before I begin, I just want to remind everybody, if you like this content, then like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And also just a reminder that Alive can be found on whatever preferred podcast platform that you like. And all you have to do is search for Alive ! With Patina, and you should be able to find it. So, have you ever met somebody who seems to be a super Christian? Someone who has devoted their entire life to Jesus, someone who works in the church or is present in worship a lot and serving people, someone who has this incredible faith throughout every circumstance and has a kind of response to life even in tough situations that's surprising, like kind and grace-filled. Well, that's how many people see Dawn Williams. She sings on the praise team almost every single week. She leads a Bible study, and she is kind, and she does extend grace to others. And even when life is difficult, Dawn still praises the Lord in the storm. That's how we see Dawn today. That's how I see and know Dawn today. But tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to draw back the curtain and we're going to peer into her past and how she got to where she is today. She's had definitely her fair share of trials, including the loss of 2 babies, divorce, some spiritual attacks and darkness, and a very tumultuous young adulthood. So, Dawn, I would like to welcome you to Alive. How was that introduction?
Wow.
Does that sound like you?
No, it does not.
I know, but when I was writing it, I thought, no, this is how I see Dawn. Now I see you in a different light, but all good.
Okay.
Because when I know where you've come from and I see where you are, that's the miracle, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And,
oh, yeah.
And, for people who don't know this, Dawn and I feel like you're a good friend and we have a lot in common and we definitely share that spiritual side and that worship side and just like freedom. So, yeah, I'm excited to kind of get into some of the highlights and the low points maybe of your life. So you are not from the area, right? You're from the Seattle area.
Correct.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So you grew up over there.
Yep.
People may assume that you have been a Christian your whole life. Have you been a Christian your whole life?
No, I have not.
So
I have not.
I'm going to answer all ask yes and no questions, and you just say yes and no.
Okay, sounds good.
We'll get to some depth here in a minute. So you didn't grow up in a Christian home, as far as like being born again, and so there's not that part of your story. So what was your family like?
Well, we were kind of typical, not typical. Typical, in that, I have 3 sisters and, we fought. Siblings fight is what we do. But, I had my mom and my dad and, but my dad was an alcoholic. He was, he didn't have a mean bone in his body. He was a sad alcoholic. But, I had a great relationship with my dad and with my mom too. And, once we all grew up, my 3 sisters and I, we actually became very close. I come from a family of incredibly strong, wonderful women. And I count my 3 sisters as 3 of the most wonderful women that I know. So they're a very important part of my life. And my dad, kind of a neat little thing that was not typical. Most people don't get to have this experience, but my dad was actually my high school band teacher for a while.
So that's where that comes from.
That's where that comes from. He was my band teacher. So that was kind of a neat experience.
Well, and just so everybody kind of has a little bit more understanding about your life. So you said you had 3 sisters. So there's 4 girls and there were 3 of us.
Yeah.
And I understand that whole fighting.
Oh, yeah.
Like legit fighting. Like girls really do fight.
Yeah, we do. Seriously.
You were the 3rd child?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you'd been in my family, I would have definitely dominated you.
Good luck.
We're going to start right now. No. So I was super close to my dad too.
Yeah.
So you were really close to your dad.
Yeah.
But he passed away.
He did. He passed away. I was, the first time I was married for probably about a year and a half. And then he died. And that was a very difficult thing for me because, right after he died, I went to Germany because my husband at that time had gotten a transfer. He was in the Air Force, and he had gotten a transfer. And so he was already there. And I stayed with my mom, waiting for him to secure off-base housing so that I could come. That, they didn't let the dependents come until they had housing. So that was really difficult, trying to be strong for my mom, because I felt like I needed to do that. So I kind of had to hold down my own feelings of loss and try to be strong and stoic and all of those things. And then I left that December. So she lost her husband, and she lost me in a sense, kind of within a very short period of time. And so off I went to Germany, and
that's a big loss for you. I mean, it's a big loss for your mother, but that's you were so young.
Yeah.
What were you, 20?
21.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I got married when I was 20. I was very, very young.
Yeah. So you're in a new environment and in a different place, a foreign place.
Yeah.
I want to kind of talk about something, and I was going to wait till later, but I'm going to bring it up now because when we were doing the pre-interview, you said something that I think is really interesting that I think people need to hear. You said that your whole life you had a darkness that surrounded you and from the time you were a child. And I just kind of want to set that out there right now, like what that really meant.
It was, a lot of people might classify it as a panic attack, but I've never had issues with, the typical triggers like large crowds or enclosed spaces or anything like that. Those things never bothered me. But And literally this, I could be sitting in my English class, for example, and this happened one time. Sitting in English class, just working on my paper, whatever it was I was doing, and all of a sudden, it was like I was overwhelmed, and it was the kind of overwhelmed. It wasn't just fear. It went beyond that. It was a sense of being so utterly and completely lost, so utterly and completely in such a dark place that it was like, I'm having a hard time putting words to it, but it almost hurt. It was the kind of darkness that reached so far deep into your soul, into your being, that you just can't help but scream because you want the lights turned back on. And I would literally, I remembered this so many times happening throughout, my life. I would just have to do this to prevent myself from screaming.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Where do you think that came from?
I don't know. I don't know what the root of it was, but looking back on it now, I have really come to believe that it was demon attacks, that it was spiritual attacks. I think Satan knew what God had planned for me, and he wanted to try to step in the middle of that and say, no, and try to derail that. I don't think he wanted that to happen.
Well, what does he do? What did Jesus say? He came to steal,
kill, and destroy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what he was trying to do to me. And I mean, ever since I can remember, as far back as I can remember, it happened during the day. It happened at night. It happened, during my first marriage. It happened, later in life during my second marriage. It sucked my soul.
I mean, I've heard you talk about it a little bit before, but never at this level. And I wanted to give you that opportunity because this is kind of the foundation of your life. Like, it was kind of always there with you. Yeah. And I think that people will connect with that. I think there are people who are going to listen to your story and they're going to say, I know exactly how she feels. I know what she's going through, or I have been through that, or I'm going through it right now. And to hear you say that it's spiritual, because what that says to me is that is way deeper than really any other type of circumstance. It's not of the world as far as just something from the outside. It's like something that's attacking your inside person.
Yes, exactly.
So you were let's go back to, you're in Germany, but you had said to me that you kind of were starting to go off the rails when you were there. And as a result of maybe your father's death and all these things kind of happening, what started happening to you when you were there?
Well, I think that I think something inside of me just kind of snapped. I think that not truly grieving, my father like I needed to, like I wanted to, and suppressing that.
Yeah.
Because I went from my mom's to, reuniting with my husband, who I hadn't seen in probably 5 or 6 months because of the separation of him being over there waiting to get housing. And I just, was kind of thrust into this whole new life and like you mentioned, in a foreign country and trying to figure out, my life. And I think I just kind of lost it. I think I just went into this moral tailspin and we would go, my husband at that time had, he had a lot of friends, single friends that lived in the dorms on the base. And so we'd go there and we'd hang out and we'd party and we'd drink and we'd do a little of this and we'd do a little of that. And it kind of got to a point where, and over there, things were a lot different. There you had you had different kinds of freedoms there. Access, yes. And everything
I told you guys, this is a different Dawn, all right?
Yes. And, I know periodically we would go over to Amsterdam and
that says it all.
Hello, the red light district, here we come. But, so we would do that. And, it just kind of became a lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And so I found myself and it was interesting because in high school, that was not something I ever did. I didn't do that as, I never did drink. I, didn't have any use for it. But over there, it just seemed like, okay, well, all right. And so I started going down that road. And
it didn't end well, did it?
No, it did not end well.
Your marriage didn't survive it?
No, it did not. I made some exceptionally poor choices. And I had an affair, and it was devastating to not just my husband at that time, who was a wonderful person. He truly didn't deserve what happened to him. But it devastated two families. It devastated his family. It devastated my family. And I didn't realize it at the time, but the devastation to me went so deep and so far that I really just didn't feel like I deserved anything, like I was worth anything. There was so much guilt and so much shame that came with that. And, I was walking around with some really heavy baggage. really heavy.
I mean, it's
baggage.
really a lesson that, so you didn't even have any, God wasn't in your life. You
No.
didn't even really know Jesus
Didn't,
at all.
no,
But
wasn't.
still, the ramifications of the decisions that we make, they still go with us.
Yes, they do.
And well, you weren't a Christian, so it doesn't matter how you live, kind of thing. But it still matters how you live, because there's a standard that God has for living, and in general,
Yeah.
even if you don't know him personally, and you were just kind of living outside of that. I think of that. This is getting all churchy, but I always go back to that scripture in Galatians 6:8. If you sow to the Spirit, you reap life everlasting. But if you sow to the flesh, you reap death and destruction. And when you do things where you're making choices that are feeding that part of you, they end in death and destruction.
Yes, they do. And I think a lot of people don't understand God's intention. Like when you just take the 10 Commandments, okay? Thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. It has nothing to do with us trying to please God, keeping the 10 Commandments. That's not what that's about.
Right.
What that's about is, I don't want you to do this. God speaking, I don't want you to do this, because if you do this, you are going to get hurt. And I
Exactly.
love you too much. I don't want you to be hurt. So don't do it.
That's exactly so. I do a Bible study, on Wednesday nights with several young women, college age and young adults. And that is exactly the subject exactly where we were when we were talking about the 10 Commandments.
Yep.
And that, I had a really kind and loving father. You had a kind and loving father. If your father asks, a kind and loving father, if they say, please don't do this, it's to protect you.
Yes.
It's not to harm you.
Yes.
It's not to be a judge and jury. It's, you're my family, you're my child, I love you, please don't do this.
Exactly.
So, but you didn't know that.
I did not know that then.
And so, but you ended up coming back to the United States, and just to give a little, you continued on in that pattern, right?
Yeah.
You ended up living and with your mom, but then you got your own place, and
Yeah, and I ended up living with this guy, and we had parties, and there was
yada yada yada.
yada yada yada, et cetera, et cetera,
Yes,
et cetera.
yes, same life, just a different place.
Different people, same life.
Yes, and but you said you did get in. So you had a scholarship. You said to go get a full ride to, where was it, for music,
Washington State University in Spokane,
and you didn't do it.
and I didn't do it.
Yeah, fear.
Fear.
Yeah, look at that. But you decided at some point, you're like, I got to pull myself together minimally. I got to do something here.
Yep, I did. I just was kind of drifting, and about the age of 26, 27, I said, I just, this is not working. And again, I still knew nothing of God. I didn't know God. It was just something in my head. I was just like, why am I doing this? And literally the thing that went through my mind, with the drugs and whatnot and the drinking, it was just like, this is so not cost effective. I could do so much more with this money if I wasn't doing it with that. So I don't know, I just made a decision, and I decided, instead of just drifting from job to job, I think I need a career path. So that's when I decided, okay, I think I'm going to try banking. Why not? Why not? Sounds like a good idea.
That's what you did.
Seemed like and I did. And I started. I went to work for a major bank, and I started out as a bank teller, and then I heard about an education program that the American Banking Association has, where you can take all kinds of different courses for all kinds of different things. And I thought, hey, I kind of like numbers; they're sort of fun. Let me do accounting. I'll take accounting classes. That'll be cool. I can make a career out of that. Sure. So I did. I started taking accounting courses, and that's about the time that I met my second husband.
And you met him in a church.
No, I'm
Kidding. No.
psych. No, I met him. Actually, I went to a club. I really wasn't looking for anything, and I wasn't there to, party or anything like that. I just wanted to go and be around people and dance and have fun. And that's where I met him. And he was in the Navy. I like those military guys. I don't know.
I know. There's a trend here.
There certainly seems to be. But so, we hit it off and we started dating, and, we got married, I don't know, probably about a year and a half later.
Okay.
Then shortly after that, we moved to New Orleans. And there I was in New Orleans. I was like, okay, well, this is interesting. When we were there, I got pregnant. First time I got pregnant, I had a miscarriage. It was very, very, very early on, maybe, 6 weeks. And that was hard. I just felt like, okay, well, maybe this is just, a little bit of retribution for, the life that I had been living. Maybe I've paid the price. Okay. So then I got pregnant again. And this time I had a wonderful pregnancy. Loved being pregnant. Shauna will hate me, but I never was sick. Never.
Yes. And for those of you who don't know, Shauna's my daughter. We haven't announced it yet. Damien can delete this part out if he wants to.
Okay.
No.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Sorry about that. But yes.
It's fine.
All you pregnant women out there, any of you pregnant women out there who have the morning sickness thing, sorry, I didn't. Sorry. I didn't. And, but anyway, I loved being pregnant. It was wonderful. And we were getting ready near the end of that pregnancy. We had been at New Orleans for, almost 4 years. And we, had gotten, my now ex-husband, he had gotten transferred to California. So we made the decision that, he was going to drive one of our 2 cars out there and then fly back. And then we were going to wait for the baby to be born, wait for the 6-week checkup, 8-week checkup, jump in the U-Haul and go and make the drive across, to California. While he was gone, or actually right before he left, I had developed preeclampsia, which is, you're retaining a lot of water, and your blood pressure tends to be very elevated, and it's something that they have to watch real closely. So they decided to put me on bed rest, and so they had a nurse coming in a couple times a week to monitor the baby, and me, and make sure everything was okay. So he felt okay to go ahead and go, so he did. And while I was there, or while he was gone, while I was at home, the nurse came one time, and she wasn't really comfortable with, how things were looking, as she was monitoring. So she went ahead and sent me over to the hospital to just, have me further tested and, see kind of, a little bit better what was going on with the baby. From that point, because I stayed overnight at the hospital, they were like, yeah, I think we need to send you over to a perinatologist. And I was like, okay.
And how far along were you in your pregnancy at this point?
I was, she was due the end of October, and this was like the early to middle October.
Okay, so just a few weeks before.
I was just about ready to go. Yeah, okay. I was due, almost due. So they sent me to the perinatologist, and what he told me was that, and they couldn't tell a whole lot from the, from the ultrasound, but it looked to him as though she had a tremendous amount of water on the brain, or had very little brain matter.
Oh wow!
And what we ultimately tried to do was, after my ex-husband got back into town, we tried to do an amnio. The doctors tried to do an amnio to see, what was going on. They couldn't draw enough fluid out, and something must have happened with that. And I think I started just going into shock.
Yeah.
And then the baby's blood pressure dropped suddenly and significantly, and so right then and there they rushed me into an emergency C-section. And I just kept thinking, I just want to hear her cry. I just want to hear her cry. And I never got to hear her cry. And then I knew something was wrong because there was a lot of chatter between the doctors and the nurses. And then once they took her out, it was like the room went quiet.
Yeah.
And they knew something, I knew something was really wrong. And at that point, I think that they had to put me back together. And so they sedated me. And
Okay.
so I woke up later in recovery and was waiting for the doctor to come in. My ex-husband and I were there together. And I kept asking him, is she okay? Is she okay? And he was just like, I don't know. I'm waiting for the doctor. He knew, but he didn't want to.
You're right.
He didn't want to say anything. So the doctor comes in and he started saying, okay, well, this is what was going on and this is going on. And every time he'd list off some kind of issue, I was like, in my head, I was like, I'll deal with that. Okay, I'll deal with that. Okay, I'll deal with that. Okay, I'll deal with that. And then he said, and she passed away. And I was like, okay, stop. I can't deal with that. That wait. And that was it. We found out that she was a trisomy 13 baby. And just super quick, what that kind of means is, people who are familiar with Down syndrome, that's the number 22 chromosome that's affected. With a trisomy 13 baby, that's the number 13 chromosome, there's one too many. And babies with trisomy 13 or 18 are incompatible with life.
Wow.
And so most of them don't survive birth. Okay. And the ones that do, they die just usually within a few days, if that long.
I mean, I can't imagine going full term, basically.
Yeah.
And your whole mind is set on. And I keep thinking about you with this darkness you talk about, and wondering how that kind of fit into that whole time period where you lost. What was her name?
Her name was Ariel Simone.
Oh, that's so pretty.
Yeah.
Do you think about her?
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. She would have been 28 this month on the 13th.
Oh, my goodness.
Yep.
Wow. So that had to be, so now you're in your 30s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mid-30s or so, early 30s.
Yeah.
You've had a lot of suffering, really, a lot of pain, a lot of bad decisions, but starting to make better decisions. And how did you and your ex-husband handle this particular?
He never let himself grieve, I don't believe. He suppressed it, I think. He just didn't want to allow himself to feel that pain and that hurt. I kept thinking about, one of the things that I was so grateful for in the hospital was the nurses. They were so kind and so wonderful and so loving and so caring. And they asked me if I wanted to hold her. And I said I was afraid. I was scared to hold her because I had built it up in my mind, what she would look like and all of that. And I was afraid because they had described what happened and what she looked like, to me. And so they said, well, I just want you to consider this, before you can say goodbye, you need to say hello. And I thought about that, and ultimately I did decide to go ahead and hold her. But I was afraid to see her face.
Yeah.
And so they said, we can drape her face, it's okay. So they did, and I held her, and I'm so glad that I did. Because she was just beautiful.
Yeah.
She was beautiful. And I have pictures of her.
Oh, good.
And it took me about a year. But I did finally look at those pictures, and she's beautiful. She was beautiful. And so, but she's in heaven now.
Yeah.
And so I know I will see her again someday.
Yes.
I will see. She's in very good hands. But at the time, it was just very difficult. It was very difficult. I I felt like a failure. I felt like such a failure. You know, I think that my ex-husband looked at me as a failure, and he was always very critical and very judgmental and very harsh in certain ways, but it really just kind of, escalated.
You already had all those feelings about yourself.
Yeah.
And this probably intensified it.
Yep. And I really felt like, well, this is karma, this is what I get for the things that I did, the people that I hurt. I deserve this. That's literally what I felt like.
I think, and you say karma, and I find that fascinating because that's what your thoughts were back then, because a lot of people think that. Mm-hmm. A lot of people talk about the universe and karma and this and that, and but what's interesting, we were talking earlier, there is a concept that's biblical, but it's sowing to the spirit, not to the flesh. It's not sowing to the universe or whatever you put in the universe. It's, it's once again, God has given a structure for life. Mm-hmm. And this is a beautiful way to live. This isn't so good over here.
Okay. Right. Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. But still things happen in life, don't they? Just because,
yes, they do.
Because we live here.
It's a fallen world.
It's a fallen world.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to move you on because you ended up, I know a little bit more about your story because I know you had another baby.
Yes, I did.
And I happen to know him.
Yes.
So you had, how long was it? What happened? How long was it before you got pregnant again?
It was probably about a year and a half, and it was a difficult struggle. I was ready to go right away because I'm a very logical person. When we went and did all the genetic testing, and they said there's nothing wrong with either one of you. It's just, hey, lightning strikes. It's just stuff happens. And I was like, okay, I'm good. We need to do this again. And he's like, no.
Yeah.
No, he had a really hard time with it. He had a very hard time with it. And for a while, he was like, we're not doing this again. No. Nope. Mm-hmm. And it was difficult because I longed so badly to have a baby. I wanted a baby so much. It was physically painful, And, but I tried really hard to respect how he was feeling too. So I tried not to talk about it. And I ultimately, he was like, all right, let's just, okay. So we had Jordan.
Yay.
I love that boy.
Who is a gift.
Oh my gosh. I cannot even begin to tell you what a blessing he is to me. He is just one of my favorite people in the whole world. And I can't imagine my life without him.
Yeah.
He's incredible.
I bet when you saw him for the first time, yeah. What a beautiful person he is. And I know a lot of that is because of you. But God gave you like a special young man.
He did. He really did.
Very talented, very kind.
Yes.
Which is awesome. And he loves music like you.
Yes, he does. We kid around kind of with each other, and I'm like, kiddo, I don't know how to tell you this, but you're kind of like me in a man's body. I'm sorry. You just are.
That's awesome.
We really are. One really quick thing, I don't think I told you before, after we had Jordan, he was about 15 months old, and we were going to visit friends. We're actually on our way out here, transfer.
Okay.
And we made the decision to stop in New Orleans and go to that hospital and find those two nurses.
Aww.
And we introduced them to Jordan.
That's wonderful.
It was so cool, and it was almost like coming full circle.
Yes.
And we were like, I don't know if you remember us. And they were like, yes, we do. And they was like, we want to introduce you to this little fella right here.
Oh, yay.
So that was really neat.
That's very special.
It was.
So you said, so you were being transferred, which is really good, because I want to get to the part, because I think up to this point, you you're going through life. Maybe, so you were in your mid to late 30s at this point. When did you move to the Orlando area?
We got to Orlando. I was about 37, I guess. Okay. Yeah, because I had Jordan at 35. Yeah, I was about 37.
So you get here, you still have not found Jesus. So we got to get to that point.
I'm still being plagued by these
the darkness.
The darkness. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened? How in the world did you encounter the creator of the universe?
Well, after we had been here for, 5 or 6 years, we just kind of collectively made the decision that we wanted to go to church. And for me, it wasn't even for myself. I said, you know what? I would like to have Jordan in church because I don't want him to go through what I went through. Let him believe in something, even if it's a fairy tale. If it gets him through life and he doesn't suffer this thing that I'm suffering with, then, awesome. Let's do it. I figured, this is not going to do anything for me, but let's do it for him. So we did. And we started going to the traditional service at Carillon. And
for if you guys don't know, this University Carillon is a United Methodist church that's right down the road, 5 or 6 miles, maybe a little bit more than that.
Yeah, it's right across from UCF.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so it's a great church. So that's where you were. All right.
That's where we were. And we actually went there. We had tried a few other churches, and then we had some friends that said, oh, you guys ought to try this church. It seems kind of cool. We've been there a few times, and we really like it. So there we were, going to the traditional service, and it was nice. Jordan Sunday school, and it was nice, and we were there with our friends, and our two families would go have brunch, together afterwards, so it was kind of like a, little weekly event. And then my friend said, hey.
And then one of those friends.
She had no idea God was using her that day. She said to me, hey, we should go. They're getting the Christmas choir together. We should sing. And I was like, okay, sure, why not? It'll be fun. And I thought, it would be fun because I hadn't been in music in so many years. I hadn't sung or played an instrument or done anything. And I thought that'd be kind of cool. So started going to the choir rehearsals, and I remember after the last cantata, because I think it was Christmas, and cantatas is what everybody does. And at the very end, the last one, this kind of older balding man who was playing guitar, I had no idea who he was. He stands up and he turns around and he sticks his hand out and he says, "Hi, I'm Mike. How'd you like to sing on the worship team?" I still remember that. And it was Mike Conrad. So funny. But
he needs to watch this.
He does. But I still remember that. And I still remember going, okay, what is that? I had no idea. What in the world?
Yeah, you'd only been to the traditional worship, which is either a piano or an organ and choir. Is that what they? Yeah.
Piano and choir. Yeah.
So the music is very different in
It's very, very different, yes. And so I was like, okay. And I had no clue. And then they said, well, here's a mic, and then I go to the, here's a microphone. And I'm like, what?
I have to hold a microphone now.
Sing into this thing.
I would rather be in the choir.
Can I just be in the choir? Yeah. So I was doing choir, and I was singing on the worship team, and I was trying to figure out why am I doing this? What's going on? And I don't know exactly how long that went on, but for a while, I don't know, several months. And then I just started realizing that, I would start crying during rehearsals and sometimes even during service, which was really embarrassing. If you were actually leading on the song, it's not good to start ugly crying. It just isn't good. But I couldn't understand what was going on. And I remember being in a choir rehearsal one day, and I just started sobbing. And the choir director says, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I don't know." And I said, "I don't know what's wrong." And she just kind of got this smile, and she said, "I think I know what's going on." And I was like, "Can you tell me?" So I think, I was being, God was talking to me in the music, and he was speaking to me in the lyrics and in the words, and he was reaching.
That love of God
Yeah.
was touching your very soul.
Yes. Yeah.
And like healing you and making you feel whole, and just that love, the power of love.
Yeah.
That's what, and we were talking earlier, so a few people here, especially one person in particular, has said to me here in this church a couple years ago, why do I cry? Why am I crying? Like, is it?
I'm not crying.
Is
You're
it
crying.
sad, or is it happy? It's happy. Okay, then this is what's happening. The Holy Spirit is touching your life.
Yeah.
And it's beauty, and that emotion is coming. So it's like this overflow. My cup runneth over.
Yes.
That's what was happening to
And
you.
down my face.
Yes.
Well, and then the other very significant thing that happened was I had this realization. It just kind of dawned on me one day that I wasn't experiencing those dark moments that just would send me screaming, and I was like, wait a minute, I can't remember the last time that went.
Hallelujah.
Seriously, I was
I'm gonna
like,
go
wait, what in the world is going on here? And I thought, man, I'm crying for no reason. I don't have these dark, horrible, attacks anymore. What's going on? And I started to realize that something was changing me. Something was changing me. And I said, wait, okay. God, if this is you, I need to make sure this is the real deal. I need to make sure this isn't some hoax. I need to make sure that this is legit. If I'm going to go all in, I got to know this is legit. And so, being the logical person that I am,
and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Logic doesn't mean that you put God over in a corner. Your logic was being used to justify what was like, I need to understand more about what's happening. God didn't make us to be, just to receive everything with no information.
No, he
gives you a mind.
66 books in the Bible telling us about it. So, it's kind of like, well, all right.
Yes.
But no, I mean, just because you come to faith, you don't get a lobotomy. That's not what happens.
Exactly.
It's not what happens. God is a God of logic and order.
Yes.
So but I needed to dig. I needed to know, and I needed to understand, and I needed facts. I had clues. I was like, okay, well, I'm being very, I'm crying for no reason, and I'm not experiencing these problems, this darkness anymore. So what's going on? What's really happening here? So I started searching and looking and digging and then trying to find whatever I could, and I wanted facts. So I started looking at like archaeology type stuff, and I ran across this article about the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I was like, Dead Sea Scrolls, what's that? So I read this article, and very brief summary, the manuscripts that we had up until the discovery of those scrolls, which was, late 1930s, in the caves of Qumran near the Dead Sea, up to that point, the manuscripts of the various books of the Bible that we had were all AD. Okay, they were dated after the death of Christ. So obviously, to the logical person such as myself, I thought, okay, well, they could have just written all this stuff after Jesus passed away and everything was fine, and they put it together and called it a Bible. Okay, but the Dead Sea Scrolls, most of them, many of them, were, when they tested and dated them, they found that they were from anywhere from like 100 BC to like 350 BC, somewhere in that time frame. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. So what you're telling me is that the whole scroll of Isaiah, which, by the way, has some of the most prolific prophecies about the coming Messiah.
Oh, yeah.
That BC scroll is the same as the AD scroll, and except for a few minor grammatical, punctuational, misspells scattered here and there, like to 98%, they're accurate to each other. Shut up. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I was just blown away. I couldn't believe it. And I just was like, that's a fact. Fact. I have a fact.
You're like, you needed a fact.
I needed a fact.
Yes.
And so I said, okay, wait a minute. And I just kept on, I kept searching and digging, and I finally just came to the realization that, the early historians, nobody ever denied Jesus' birth and death on the cross. The only thing that ever seemed to be at question was, did he rise from the grave?
Exactly.
But I just said, you know what? I know he did. There's no way that Isaiah, the scroll from the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's no way that could be. There's no way. It has to be. So that was really the turning point for me. And so it was a bit of an evolution. But once I realized and I made that decision and I made that choice, it was like, that's it. I'm all in. I'm there.
And I think this is a really important point in your journey. Your journey, some people have this experience that is, I was this, I had an encounter with Jesus, and now I'm this, totally different, on a different path, 100%. No. Yours was more like, we were talking earlier, like you're in a dark forest, and there you see a light, and you see a little bit of light, so you start going that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And as you continue on in that direction, the light keeps getting brighter, and finally you come to the clearing. And then it's like, ta-da,
Yeah.
But it took time.
Yes.
And what's really cool about it is that you had this gradual illumination, but God cared enough for you to give you that time.
Yes.
To process everything, and He knew ahead of time what
did.
And what He had designed. So then, but I'm so intrigued by the fact that all of that darkness that you had too, gone, and you've not had any since then. Nothing. So what it's like that freedom, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom.
Yeah.
So where you are filled with the Spirit, there is no more room for whatever was going on.
Darkness.
No. And so, but you continue to allow that light to shine in, and so the darkness was like gone, and that's amazing. Now, I do want to point out one more thing. And by the way, Dawn teaches a Bible study. If you don't know that, we already talked about that on Sunday morning after worship. Have you already started it? The second book of Daniel?
We're starting tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're watching, of course, this won't show till Tuesday,
right.
But it won't be too late. You can
it.
still join in. I do want to point out one other thing. We've got just a couple more minutes. You were with your husband in church. You were now up on the stage. You were worshiping. God was doing something incredible in you. Your son was going to church. What happened with your relationship with your husband?
Well, ultimately, I went toward God and he went away from God. And as I began to change and grow and realize that, yes, I am good enough. Yes, I am worth something. If the God of heaven, if the God of creation loves me enough to send Jesus to die on a cross for me, then I'm worth something. Yeah. And as I began to rest in that and grow in that and believe that, I began to stop believing what I had been told for so many years and so many years, which was, you can't do anything right. You're a terrible mom. You're a terrible wife. You're terrible this, terrible that. You look ridiculous when you're on that stage singing. What do you think you're doing? That kind of thing. So I finally, things really did come to a head. Won't go into tremendous detail on that, but just suffice to say that there was one afternoon where there was some violence that took place. And so it was then that I knew that it was time. It was time to go. And so I went through the court process, got an injunction, and he was removed from the house. And at that point, Jordan was 17 in his senior year of high school. We went our separate ways. And it was difficult because I didn't really know what to expect. It was a difficult divorce. It was hard. It was traumatic, to say the least.
You guys have been married for years, too.
Yeah, it was almost 24 years by the time, the divorce was actually finalized. But once everything was said and done, of course, it also really took my feet out from under me financially. That was a byproduct. But I really learned through that, especially through that I needed to just put it in God's hands and trust Him and just say, okay, what am I going to do today?
That's right.
Okay, what am I doing today? What am I doing tomorrow? And I couldn't look too far ahead. It's like, what am I going to do today? It's like the whole reason that God sent manna.
I was just thinking that.
I know, I could see it in your face. The whole reason that God sent manna was, for one day at a time, was because He wanted the children of Israel to depend on Him every day. Give us this day our daily bread. That's right. And so I had to learn how to do that and rely on God on a daily basis. Give me just what I need for today, because today is really hard.
That's right.
Today is really hard.
And there's something to be said about learning to walk and live by faith. And that is sometimes moment by moment. It's daily. This is how we're supposed to live. It's, we get in this thing where we provide for ourselves. We think we're doing it all ourselves. We have enough money. We have our whole future planned out. This is what I'm going to do and all these things. But we're not even trusting God. It's like, that's why I think when you go to places where they don't have a lot, and I'm talking about, I've been on many mission trips, or you go down to, or the Orlando Union Rescue Mission, where people don't have a lot, and as far as financial or material possessions, they have to trust. There are places where you have to trust God because you have a headache, and you have to give that to God and say, can you heal me? Will you heal me today? So we live in this world where that most of us live like that. But when you are in a situation, when you learn to trust God like that, like when you have to, and then you learn it, you can get through anything.
I will say the day that I went to the courthouse and filed for the injunction, the first time that I went, it was not granted. But what they did do was they sent they sent paperwork out that was supposed to be served to him for a court appearance. And that scared me to death because I didn't know when or where that was going to happen. I didn't know if it was going to happen, if he was going to be at work. I didn't know if he was going to be at home. I didn't know what the result of that was going to be, what he would do. And so they told me, come back. There's going to be a different judge, and you can supplement your report, your filing. The other option was we tear everything up, we throw it away, and we pretend like it never happened. Well, as I'm sitting there trying to figure out that decision, I didn't know what to do. Neither one looked like a good option, and I was really scared. And the only thing I could do was just say, God, help me. And He did. And like a light bulb, like someone just switched on the lights in the room, I I just sat up in that chair and I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to go home, go ahead and send the paperwork out. God's got this. So I went that Monday, and this happened like on Thursday, Friday, the week before. Went back on Monday, added a supplemental statement to my report, went and waited, and the counselor came out, the one that I had seen before, and she looked really, she had this like frown on her face. And I said, you look like you don't have good news for me. Did they not grant the injunction? And she said, no, they did. And I said, well, why do you look like that? She said, well, you remember I told you that, the judge that heard the case, there'd be a new judge because they rotate them in and out. And I said, yeah. She says, well, the judge that was supposed to come in today, he called in sick. So the judge that heard your case last week that denied your injunction is the same judge that heard that read your supplemental statement and granted the injunction. And I said, that's a good thing, right? She said, yeah. She says, you don't understand. This judge never changes his mind. Never changes his mind. And she said, for you, he did. And I said, that's God. That's God.
Absolutely.
That's God. And so nobody can tell me that God doesn't move in a very personal way in people's lives. He does. He saves when he needs to save, and he was there. He was right there the whole time. And I will never forget that. I will never forget that as long as I live. And to know that he reached out and touched my life.
That's right.
In that way. It's absolutely amazing.
I mean, I look at you now, and I see how God is using you and how you're so at peace and content. Mm-hmm. And this is the way you are all the time. I mean, I know everybody has their moments, but for the most part, I don't think I've ever seen you freaking out or anything like that, and we're going to go to a concert in a couple weeks. I can't wait.
Ooh, that'll be fun.
Yeah. I mean, and we've gone, and just so you guys know, Dawn, we're worship, that's our thing. And we went to a church, I don't know, before, was it after COVID or right before? I can't remember. Right before, that's right.
Right before.
And we went over there, and it was nobody knew us. It was so awesome. And
pushing people out of the way.
Yeah,
we gotta worship.
I need more space.
Yeah,
you're in my zone. But I think that it's because when and I have a similar story in a lot of ways as you have had, but when you experience the love of God, that where you are so broken, and then all of a sudden it's you just feel like you're opening up to the goodness of God, and then he changes you and fills you up and makes you whole. You don't have those insecurities. You don't all that negative, and all of a sudden you're going on a different path. I mean, it's enough to make you want to run up and down the hall singing hallelujah the whole time. As my grandmother used to have with the hanky in her hand, Jesus, Jesus, I think it's I'm almost there. You're pretty much there. But
exactly.
But I thank you so much for being transparent and sharing your story, your past, but also your present and your future. And, God has really used you in my life. So that's why I wanted to have you on. I really respect you, and I thank you for being a part of the ministry here at this church. And ladies and gentlemen, if you need any support or love or prayer, Dawn is right there. And I know that for a fact. So, I just want to thank all of you for joining us and hearing Dawn's story this evening. And may God bless you. And tune in again in a couple weeks when we'll have our next guest on Alive.